What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about SPY and Tesla and the QQQ and the indices. I'm going to break down what's going on with Nvda and Amazon and Apple and many other tickers out there. I'm going to talk about what catalysts are coming out for tomorrow, what earnings are coming out, and how this could affect the markets. What you should be watching for moving forward, as we have some very, very important news to discuss. Before I break anything down about all this information, though, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire community as a whole. And finally, check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 10 free stocks. Then it can be a free Tesla share, a free AMC share, or a mix of all of them. The offer ends in just 9 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Alright guys, so in my previous videos, I was telling you that I was seeing signals of the market potentially selling off very soon. And you will notice that the market got a small pop after the Aapl pump we got as we approached the event. And as a result, it didn't really hold up. The market just got this big rejection, and I warned you guys that there's a chance Aapl could sell off afterwards. Now, in my video from yesterday, I told you there are two possibilities. Maybe the market pumps a little bit more and then gets a sell-off, or we just sell off from this level right here, which is around the 428 zone. And I was leaning a little bit more bearish, and I wasn't too sure if we would get that pump. Instead, we just got one more pump, which was a little bit higher than what I thought, or what I was leaning towards. But then we ended up selling off as I predicted because of Aapl selling off, which dictated this market. And if you look at Aapl, I mean, this thing just got this big rug pull. It dropped down pretty hard after that big pump it got. Just look at the 4 hour, this crazy, crazy red candle after the event. And the overall event was pretty promising for Aapl. I mean, Aapl announced some very awesome products like the Vision Pro, which is selling for about 3,400, almost 3,500 plus tax. It has a 2 hour battery usage time, which is not that long. And overall, it's very interesting stuff. So I know a lot of people are going to be buying this. Very, very cool. They had new updates coming out for their Macs, new software updates, and just a bunch of other things they mentioned. As a result, this was like a buy the rumor, sell the news kind of event. And I warned you guys about this. I said that that's very likely. And as a result, that's what happened. Now, for earnings, we have Dave & Buster's tomorrow. We have a couple of others which aren't too significant. But then I just want to note that for Wednesday, we have GameStop, Campbell's, and finally for Friday, we have NIO. And I think NIO is going to be very interesting approaching earnings. I'm getting some bullish signals on NIO. It might try to pump approaching it. I'm going to break down NIO in just a few minutes, though. For tomorrow, we have the Economic Optimism Index report that's coming out. That's very important for the outlook of investors and everyday people for the economy moving forward, and this will affect how the market moves. So at 10 o'clock a.m. tomorrow Eastern Time, make sure you are ready for this. About 30 minutes after the market opens, there's going to be a big move depending on what on earth this is looking like. And the consensus is very high. It's higher than what the forecast is. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. But now let's break down some of these charts. What are they telling us for the markets moving forward? Well, honestly, guys, the overall trend is starting to look more bearish on SPY. If you look at the 4 hour, we're about to get this crossover on the MACD. And then if I zoom out, if you look at the MACD, notice how whenever we get these like bearish crosses, like here, for example, we tend to see either chop or we tend to see it sell off a bit, right? And right here, there's another example. This happened around the end of April. Got a bearish cross. Market came down. Bounced off the 200 though. Right here, there's a bearish cross. Right here, when SPY was at 420, we came all the way down to 415 before we got another bounce off the 50 EMA. Right? Now we're pumped up. We formed a bearish divergence right here. You could see it more clearly on the smaller time frames. This got a rejection. And let me just show you where the bearish divergence was on SPY. It was right here. So look at the 30-minute time frame. Look at the RSI. You can quite clearly see it. And it looks like this thing is set for more downside. Now we're testing the 50 EMA, which means we could get an attempt to bounce in the morning tomorrow before it continues to sell off. But the overall trend is starting to favor the bears even more. And it's very likely the market has more downside to go, especially on the QQQ. Now, I'm leaning in that direction. I'm going to break down the levels in just a couple of minutes. Let me just also mention that on the daily chart on SPY, this overall trend is still not looking that great. It is losing some momentum here, but there isn't enough confirmation on the daily for us to make a more objective claim. So we're still waiting for that. There's not much else going on. Now let's talk about what levels we should be watching for. All right, so if you're bullish, you're going to be looking for a bounce off the 50 EMA, then a retest of this 427.5 resistance. If that breaks, we could make our way all the way up to 428 and 428.5. 429, then 430 is going to be the major resistance. I don't see us going all the way up to 430 without some major catalyst. I don't see what's going to come. There's not much going on right now. The whole debt ceiling news has been taken care of. Apple had its event and ended up just tanking afterwards. Apple could get some kind of balance, a very small one, which could pump the market just a little bit into the morning before it continues to downtrend. And as far as support goes, you got to watch the 50 EMA at 427. If that fails, watch 426. This 426 to 425 zone has a lot of chop. So around this area. And then if 425 ends up failing, it's going to likely come all the way down to fill this gap closer to 422. There's some support at gap support at like 423, but I don't think it's going to be as strong to stop it. 422 is going to come if 425 fails. So there's going to be a bigger drop if that happens. And I think what's going to happen is we either just see a lot of sideways action, the market holds up for a day or so, a little bit longer, before the big rug pull comes, a bigger rug pull, or we could just start to see it as soon as support breaks. Right now, technicals look like we could get a small bounce, a retest of the 428 zone, or get very close to it before it continues to trade sideways. But I'm going to be watching the 426 zone. Could we hold 426 or do we break below it? If 426 fails us, 425 is going to be very important. And if that fails, we're going to just get a big drop, in my opinion. I'm not saying it's going to be a crash or like a massive drop. I'm trying to change my terms, because technically if we drop $2, you could argue that's a somewhat big drop for people who trade options. But my point is, I'm going to be watching this on a level basis. I'm not talking about like new lows or SPY going to 300 or 390. I'm not talking about any of that, okay? That's the big difference between this channel and many others out there. A lot of people were talking about new lows. Do I think new lows are possible? Yeah, it is a possibility. But what's the catalyst? I'm not seeing it yet. And we have so much support between where we are right now and a new low, or even like 420 flat, for example. And that's why you have to watch support and resistance very carefully first before you make any claims about that. So right now, the trend is starting to change. We got this big rejection, and we're going to be looking for a confirmation bounce. So it tries to bounce and establishes a lower high. If it fails to break this high right here, the trend is going to change, and we're likely going to see this thing start to downtrend, maybe trade sideways in the beginning, then continue to downtrend. I'm going to be watching this thing test 426 very soon. And if 426 fails us, it's going to go a lot lower. It may take a couple of days though, but I do see more downside being more likely. For Tesla, from the bearish divergence today, I called this out in the morning. And then, if anything, Tesla failed to hold 220. After it failed to hold 220, it came into this chop zone. See how well it was chopping around this area, very close to holding support right here. The 216 point, this is like almost 217, a little bit below it. Between there and about 218, Tesla was just chopping around. And then, if anything, it pushed at the very end, but it's still looking kind of weak, because on the 4-hour, if you look at Tesla, losing momentum, it's very overbought. It's likely going to see some downside now. Not looking very strong in my opinion. On the 1-hour time frame, it's also looking the same. It's just very choppy. But it needs confirmation first for us to make a bigger claim. So if you're bullish on Tesla, it could make an attempt to try to push up just a tiny bit, try to get back to this 218 area, but it failed to break above 220. Additionally, Tesla got a nice pump in the morning because an unexpected piece of news came out, as Tesla killed it in terms of Chinese sales. They did very well there, and that's why Tesla popped in the morning and had some relative strength. From a technical standpoint, it's looking weaker though. It still looks kind of weak because we have a bearish divergence, and I think the odds favor Tesla potentially coming back down. This is starting to look like a left shoulder, maybe a head is forming, and we could come down to this 214 support and then try to bounce off that, then continue to drop. That's another possibility. But I do believe Tesla's going to test 214 to 214.5 very soon, which is where the 50 EMA happens to be. I think there's a good chance Tesla's going to come down to these lower levels first, chop around a little bit around the 214 zone before it continues to sink later on during the week. I'm saying this may take a couple of days, but it's eventually going to make its way down to this 209 to 210 area to fill this imbalance. I think the odds greatly favor that. Now, I can't always account for new pieces of news. Sometimes they're unpredictable, which is why I record videos in the morning in case there's something new that happens. But despite that, I think the odds still greatly favor downside for the markets and downside for Tesla. For the QQQ, if you're bullish on the QQQ, you need to see this thing hold above 355.5 to 356. We got a nice breakout, and this was your confirmation of this thing pushing up. We came very close to my 358 target. We came a little bit below it at 357.5, but then it rejected and came right back down and almost closed red. This was a big rejection. Could we be forming like a left shoulder ahead and then a right shoulder is about to form? That's a possibility. But please remember, when you zoom out of the charts, there's a negative divergence right here on the RSI and the MACD, and we got a rejection. So we need confirmation. We need to see this thing bounce a little bit off the 50, confirm a lower high, then start downtrending. And the confirmation of a bigger drop is going to be a break below 353. If that happens, it's going to make a big drop down to 350, like shortly afterwards, maybe within a day afterwards. So we're going to be watching support in this zone. And it looks to me like it's going to chop around a bit between 354 to 355 for some time before it continues to sink, but the odds favor downside anyways later this week. Now, if you look at the HYG, it's also kind of red. We saw some bonds traders selling in the market. On the 4-hour time frame, it's about to get this bearish cross. It's losing some momentum. That is not good for the markets. It is still showing a sign of a slowdown. NEO, however, is showing some strength. If you look at NEO, there's a possible inverse head and shoulders forming here. It's holding up nicely and had a bullish divergence that's playing out. If the bullish divergence plays out with this inverse head and shoulder, there's a good chance it's going to make its way up well above $8 and continue pushing into the mid 8s. This is looking quite nice. We have a bullish cross on the PPO, and there's no real sign of major weakness. I do think the market could slow it down a bit, especially if the market starts slowing down. But the reason why NEO has some strength is because NEO had earnings. It has earnings in just a couple of days, I think on Friday. So because NEO has earnings on Friday, there's a good chance that it's going to make an attempt to bounce. And we could see NEO make an attempt to push to the upside. I think NEO is going to hold around this level. It's going to maybe retest 7.5 and try to continue to push. And as we get very close to earnings, we might see NEO take off and approach the $8 area. If that breaks, 8.25 could come on NEO, and it could continue to push up and outperform the market. There's a good chance because it is forming this inverse head and shoulder formation, and it looks good. It looks like a very nice setup, but we need confirmation if it breaks this high right here above $8. It's likely going to make its way all the way up to 8.61. Good money could be made on that if you learn to play it, but I'm just saying, if you look at the NASDAQ, for example, right, this thing was up, people got very excited, but I was warning you guys, there's a bearish divergence. Be very careful, okay? And look at this. The bearish divergence has been playing out, and it closed very close to where the 50 EMA is. We're likely going to see this thing try to bounce, get back to about 13,300 before it continues to sink. If it breaks below the 50, it's going to come all the way down to 13,100. That's going to drag down a lot of the tech sector, from Tesla to, Apple, and the list goes on. Apple is also going to play a big role in that. The VIX was just barely green, very, very flat. But on the VIX, you will notice, let's get the 1-hour time frame. I think there was actually, I'm not seeing any divergence or anything like that. But the VIX is, once again, very close to being in this oversold territory. So I would like to see the VIX try to bounce from here. It's very close to where this support zone just so happens to be. So I'll be watching that carefully. If anything, it's just continuing. It's just barely in this wedge that I was in. It's basically retesting it. And it's trying to hold support at the bottom here. So there's a chance the VIX might try to make an attempt to bounce. It hasn't finished filling this gap down here, though. It's very close to doing so. If the VIX comes down to fill this gap, maybe the market bounces just a tiny bit, and then the VIX tries to bounce off here because of the market selling off. There's a chance the market may pop in the morning, then continue to sell off because of this formation on the VIX. On the dollar, it's holding 104. If it keeps breaking out and it gets closer to this high level, because we have this imbalance in volume, it could become bearish for the markets. There's a good chance of that happening. We had a crossover on the 1 hour, though. On the 4 hour, the dollar is still showing some strength. And if it continues to hold these levels, if it continues to bounce off the 50 EMA, that could become bearish for the markets. For Coinbase, I told you guys, if it broke below 60, you're going to be watching that 58 support, and if that fails, it's just 55. Let me also add that we have this gap right here, which Coinbase filled. It's going to make an attempt maybe to make its way closer to 60 one more time to retest the 50. If it rejects off there, that could be a confirmation of a trend change and to come down to even lower levels to retest 55, if not even lower than that. But if we hide the extended hours, I think there's a gap down here. It's very important to watch this area because if it rejects off the 50 and it comes down to about 54, that's a very important support. It's got to hold 54. If that fails, it's going to make its way all the way down to 50 flat, if not even 47.66. So it's got to hold 54 if it does reject and come down. It's going to try to bounce first, retest about 60 or so, but overall, there's a good chance it may continue to downtrend if the market causes it to do so. And once again, the odds greatly favor that, so be very careful with this. There's that gap below. Now, adding on to Aapl, Aapl is a very volatile stock today. It was pretty insane. Now, if anything, Aapl hit this resistance zone that I called out. I told you to watch 185 on Aapl. That's almost exactly where Aapl rejected, very close. The next level to watch for, right? We have all these different levels now. You have to adjust this. You have this level right here. It's like 182.8 zone, just about there. And then coming down, we basically bounced off 178, very close to the support that I called out. If 180 failed us, that's where Aapl got a bounce. And it's going to make an attempt to get a rebound. There's going to be some resistance at 181.3, then 182.5 to 182.7. There's some resistance coming up if it does rebound, but if it does continue to reject, it's going to likely continue to downtrend. And we're going to be watching 177 as support, followed by 175. And the thing about this is we got this bearish cross on the PPO. I'm going to be anticipating Aapl to bounce just a little bit, maybe retest the 5 EMA. The market might try to rebound just a little bit off that, but then Apple's likely going to remain weak and sideways and then continue to sell off. Retest 177, 178, I'm sorry, then 177.3, which is where the 50 is, then even lower levels over the next couple of days. For Nvda, I told you guys it might make an attempt to get closer to about the 400 level. It actually got stopped at about 395, so it was $5 off from my target. And overall, the trend is looking more bearish on the 4-hour time frame. It is rejecting off this trend line, so it might try riding this trend line. It could reject off this level again, and we might see it retrace a little bit to about the mid 180s, not 380s. Sorry about that, guys. The mid 380s. So there's quite a bit going on with Nvda. It also has this major support at 370, 375, and 377. We're going to be watching those all very carefully. And what we could also do is look for the big move that's coming, because you could take another trend line just like this and then connect every single one of these support zones. So you can take it like this. And if you look at it, it's getting very tight. So I'm going to be expecting a big move. I don't think the odds favor the market breaking out. So it's going to be tricky for Nvda to try to break this. It's getting very, very tight, basically. It might break to the downside, though, if the market does end up causing that. But I'm always going to be open-minded. If it could hold above 400, there's a good chance it can make its way up to 420. Okay, we need to see the video hold above 400. It's going to fly to about 420 if we get a massive move like that. If 400 breaks, we're going to be watching, once again, 405, 412, then potentially 420. But because it's getting so tight, there's a good chance it's just going to make a very explosive move, possibly make its way up all the way up to this 420 level soon if we get the bullish break. If we don't get the bullish break, if we turn bearish, Nvda could come all the way back down to 377 to 375, if not 370, which is where the 50 happens to be. Now, I'm kind of in the middle with this because, like I said before, the market's just not looking that great. But for Nvda, I'm always going to be open-minded. There's a chance that Nvda could get a bounce and try to make its way up into the 400s. It's a possibility. If it breaks to the upside, if it breaks and holds 400, there's a high probability of 405, 412, and possibly 420. So watch those levels and watch which direction it breaks in. I'm not entirely sure because of the structure in the market as the market is starting to weaken. For Google, if we're bearish, I mean, it rejected off 128. If it continues to drop, there's this imbalance or what appears to be this big change in the volume on this 124 area. It has a chance to come down to 124 for bearish. If we're bullish, it has to break and hold 128. If that happens, it's going to make its way up to 130. I'm leaning in the direction that it's going to try to bounce in the morning and then start to downtrend as time goes on and slowly make its way down closer to about 125. That's where I'm leaning towards. I'm saying that because there's also this bearish divergence that developed right here on the chart. It made a higher high, but the RSI made a lower high. And the odds greatly favored cooling off a bit. Could try to bounce first and then cool off, but it's likely going to make its way down to 125 and 124 afterwards. For Amazon, if anything, is still looking the same, not really doing too much. Major support in the 4-hour happens to be around the 50 EMA around this 120 area. Amazon, excuse me, it's very, very sideways, very choppy, not really doing a whole lot. It's been trying to trend above the 1-hour 50 EMA too. It's going to likely make an attempt down to this 123.5 and then try to bounce off that, but I just see it making very sideways price action, not really doing too much. There was a bearish divergence that developed, and that's why it did sell off just a little bit. It could continue to sell off if it breaks below the 50. If that breaks, it's going to make its way down, all the way down to about 120. But for now, we have to watch how it attempts to hold the 50. I'm going to be looking for a test of this. It could bounce off that and hold it anyways. For Meta, I told you guys Meta likely would have saw some downside. My target was 275 yesterday. That's almost exactly where Meta went to, but it got this big rejection, and now it's hovering above the 50 EMA on the 1-hour time frame. We could see Meta make an attempt to bounce here, and if it does bounce, there's going to be some heavy resistance around this 272.6 zone, followed by about 274. These are two zones to watch for as resistance, but the problem with Meta is it has this bearish divergence. If it breaks below the 50, it's going to come all the way down to 269, then potentially the mid 260s. I'm going to be very careful with this. I think it's going to try to bounce first, but it might fail. It might establish a lower high and start downtrending more because of the market. That's what I'm leaning more towards. I think it may take a couple of days, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now, out of all the stocks out there, I mean, many of them may make attempts to bounce, but the trend is still looking a little bit more bearish. But there's some tickers out there that have some potential to make bigger moves if we get confirmation, such as Nvda and NEO. Okay, so those are the two stocks out there that have a lot of potential. NEO could make its way up. Just right now, at the time I'm recording this, it just touched 8.12. Very interesting stuff. That's just a very long wick. It doesn't mean too much. I think NEO has some potential. Has a very, very nice setup in particular. And the same thing with Nvda. It's getting very tight. It's going to break in one direction. I mean, if it breaks over 400 in a very strong manner, it could get a very, very big retest because it's getting very tight on such a giant-sized wedge. But if it breaks to the downside, once again, it could get a big rug pull. I'm kind of in the middle right now. We'll see what this thing does, but I'm always open-minded and optimistic. All right, so anyways, that's what I have for this video. For most of the stocks out there, for most of the ETFs and the indexes, I'm anticipating that the market as a whole is going to see some sideways action, small bounce in the morning followed by sideways action and potential sell-off later on. I think the odds greatly favor that. There may be some exceptions such as Nvda and NEO, but it's very important that we look at every single one of these objectively and try our best to not be biased. So make sure you watch support and resistance and make sure you do what you have to do. All right, so thank you for listening. Have a great day. Don't forget I have some merch for you guys if you're interested in buying a tank top, a hoodie, or a t-shirt that says buy low, sell high, buy the dip to the moon or something like that. It would really help the channel. It's really your choice though. I also have the Moomoo link. The offer ends very soon. $100 deposited will get you up to 10 free stocks. All right, guys, have a great day. Tesla in the market to the moon as the long term is very bright. And peace out.